Have you ever felt like the whole world was against you, even the judge meant to protect justice? Imagine standing in a courtroom where every eye is on you, not with kindness but with judgment and laughter. That's exactly what happened to Leo, a quiet, misunderstood teenager. The moment he stepped into that room, the judge chuckled. The courtroom erupted in laughter. They saw him as nothing more than trouble, a kid who'd made a mistake, nothing more. But then, with just one sentence, everything changed. The laughter stopped, the room froze, and suddenly, everyone saw Leo in a completely different light. This isn't just a story about a courtroom or a teen in trouble, it's about pain, courage, and the truth hidden behind a single moment. I promise you, what happened next will shock you, because sometimes the most powerful words come from the most unexpected places. Stay with me, and I'll tell you exactly what Leo said that left a whole courtroom frozen. Leo wasn't like the other kids. He didn't cause trouble just for fun. He was quiet, kept to himself, and always seemed to be carrying a heavy weight no one else could see. At school, teachers called him disruptive, but they never really tried to understand why. His classmates teased him, but nobody stood up for him. At home, things weren't any better. Leo lived with his mom and little sister in a small apartment that always felt too cold or too empty. His mom worked long hours, 2 jobs sometimes just to keep food on the table and pay the bills. Leo rarely saw her fully awake, and his sister, only 6, often went to bed hungry. Leo tried to hold it all together. He kept his worries locked inside, hoping one day things would get better. But the hunger, the cold, the loneliness, they grew heavier every day. One night, desperate and scared, Leo did something he never imagined he would do. He broke into a local convenience store. But here's the thing, he didn't take anything. He left money on the counter. He only wanted to find food for his little sister. But no one believed his story. The police arrested him. His future suddenly looked very dark. Nobody listened to Leo's side of the story. Nobody cared to look beyond the surface. To them, he was just another kid in trouble, a lost cause. But Leo knew he had to fight to be heard. Little did he know, his day in court would change everything. The day of Leo's court hearing arrived. The courtroom was cold and silent, except for the whispers and sideways glances aimed at Leo. The judge, a stern man with a sharp voice and a quick laugh, scanned Leo's file before looking up and chuckling. His laugh wasn't kind, it was mocking. The sound echoed through the room. People in the courtroom smirked. Some even laughed quietly to themselves. To them, Leo was just another troublemaker, a kid who had made a dumb mistake. The public defender barely glanced at Leo, as if the case was already lost. Leo stood there, shrinking into himself. His hands trembled, and his eyes were fixed on the floor. Behind him, his mother wiped tears silently, trying to stay strong. The prosecutor didn't hide his eagerness. He spoke coldly, painting Leo as a criminal who deserved harsh punishment. Juvenile detention was the only option, he argued. The room seemed ready to agree. Then it was Leo's turn to speak. Everyone expected him to stay silent, to mumble a weak excuse or just accept his fate. But what happened next shocked every single person in that room. Because sometimes, the smallest voice can be the loudest, and the truth, it has a way of stopping even the coldest hearts. Leo took a deep breath. His voice was soft, barely above a whisper at first, but as he spoke, every word carried the weight of everything he had been holding inside. I only broke in because my sister hadn't eaten in 2 days. 14 simple words. The courtroom went completely silent. No one laughed anymore. No one whispered. The judge stopped shuffling papers. The prosecutor's mouth fell slightly open. Even Leo's mother held her breath. It was as if time had frozen. Those words weren't just a statement. They were a cry for help. A truth so raw it cut through the noise and the judgment like a knife. The judge stared at Leo, eyes wide. The room waited, waiting for what would come next. But Leo said nothing else. He looked down again, his heart pounding. That single sentence changed everything. It shifted the entire energy in the courtroom. Suddenly, Leo wasn't just a troublemaker or a criminal. He was a brother, a son, someone fighting to protect the people he loved. And in that moment, the laughter stopped. Because sometimes, the truth is the loudest sound in the room. The judge leaned forward, his tone softer now. Tell me more, Leo. And Leo did. He told them about the days when the fridge was empty, and his little sister cried herself to sleep because she was hungry. How their mom worked 2 jobs but still couldn't make ends meet. How he begged for help from teachers, neighbors, anyone who would listen, but no one did. How desperation drove him to that store, not to steal but to find food for his family. He explained how he left money on the counter, the few dollars he had, because he didn't want to take anything that wasn't his. His story was raw, honest, and heartbreaking. The courtroom shifted. The prosecutor frowned, glancing at the files. The public defender's eyes widened, quickly pulling out papers to check the facts. After a few moments, the truth became clear. Leo's story wasn't just words, it was real. People began to see Leo not as a criminal, but as a kid caught in a terrible situation. The judge's expression softened, and even the prosecutor seemed to hesitate. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't a place of judgment, it was a place of understanding. And that understanding changed everything. The room stayed silent as the judge took off his glasses and looked directly at Leo. "I wasn't expecting this," he said quietly. Everyone waited. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers still on the keys. The judge leaned back slowly in his chair. His hands rested gently on the arms, but his fingers were no longer tapping or tense. For a moment he just stared at Leo, quietly, thoughtfully. His face, once stern and unreadable, now looked almost human, tired maybe, or maybe just remembering. Then he spoke. His voice, which had filled the courtroom earlier with sarcasm and clipped authority, was now something else. Softer, slower, almost emotional. "When I was your age," he began, his gaze distant, "I remember standing in a grocery store. I was staring at a loaf of bread. It was a plain white loaf, nothing fancy, but I couldn't afford it. I had maybe 37 cents in my pocket." The room, which had been full of murmurs and movement just minutes earlier, had fallen completely still. Even the guards weren't shifting anymore. "My mother worked long hours," he continued. "Sometimes double shifts at the factory. Other times, she cleaned houses on the weekends just to make a little extra. But it was never enough. Some nights, we didn't eat. And when we did, it wasn't much." He paused again, the memory clearly real, heavy. "I know what it's like to feel helpless. I know what it's like to be hungry, to walk home with an empty stomach and wonder why the world didn't seem to care. I know what it's like to feel invisible." There was a strange tightness in the air. You could feel it in your chest, like the whole room was holding its breath, waiting, unsure what would come next. "I was lucky," he finally said, "because someone, just one person, saw something in me. It was a teacher, actually. She kept me after class one day, gave me an extra sandwich from her lunch, then another time. Then she helped me apply for a program. She didn't have to, but she did. That one person changed the direction of my life." He shook his head slightly, the memory still fresh, still close. His next words were quieter. "But I never forgot what that hunger felt like. Not just the kind in your stomach, but the kind in your heart, the kind that comes from being ignored, the kind that tells you that you don't matter." Then slowly his eyes found Leo again. "You reminded me of that boy I used to be." That one sentence seemed to wrap the entire courtroom in silence. It was no longer about a judge and a defendant. It wasn't about laws or files or cold facts. It was about one man recognizing the pain he had once felt in the eyes of another. There was a pause. No one filled it. No one dared to. It was the kind of silence that didn't ask to be broken. The kind that felt sacred. And in that silence, something powerful passed between the judge and Leo. Not pity, not even sympathy. Recognition. The judge wasn't just seeing a kid who had broken the law. He was seeing a scared, exhausted, broken boy who had been doing the only thing he knew to protect someone he loved. The weight of the courtroom changed. You could feel it. What had once been a place of judgment suddenly felt like a place of connection. Then the judge straightened in his chair. His voice was steady now, strong but not harsh, more like a teacher, or maybe a father, someone who wanted to do what was right, not just by the book, but by the heart. "This isn't just a legal matter," he said, his words slow and clear. "This is a call for help." And with that he closed the file in front of him, and made his decision. He dismissed the charges. No probation, no juvenile detention, no labels, just dismissed. But that wasn't the end. He looked to the representatives from Child Services, who had been seated in the back watching quietly. "I want support in place for this family immediately," the judge said firmly. And I don't mean removal or separation. I mean real support. Food assistance, counseling, home visits, not inspections. Give them tools, not threats. The officials nodded quickly, already scribbling notes. Then the judge turned his attention back to Leo. He reached slowly for a folder on the bench, a manila file tucked under a stack of others. It was slightly worn at the corners, as if it had been opened and closed many times. He opened it and stared at the contents for a long moment. His face was unreadable again, but this time, it wasn't cold, it was careful. Then he cleared his throat. I don't often get to do this, he began, looking around the room. In fact, it's rare, very rare. But today, I'm going to do something different. Every eye in the courtroom was locked on him. I'm going to give someone a second chance. He turned back to Leo and continued, his voice softer now, more personal. There's a local organization I work with from time to time. It was started by someone who, like you, grew up with very little. Someone who knows what it means to fight for every meal, every bit of hope. They run a scholarship fund. It's meant for students who show resilience and heart. He paused and you could feel the weight of what was coming. I've spoken to the director, and with your mother's permission, we'd like to offer you that scholarship. It'll help with school, tutoring, even mentorship. If you accept it, you won't have to fight alone anymore. For a second, Leo didn't react. He just stared. His face was blank, his mind clearly trying to make sense of the words, of the kindness, of the fact that someone, especially a judge, believed in him. His mouth opened but no sound came. Behind him, his mother gasped softly and covered her mouth. Her shoulders shook as the tears finally came. Everyone in the courtroom leaned forward, not out of curiosity, out of hope. Because something rare had happened in that room. Not just mercy, not just justice, but grace. And for Leo, it was the beginning of something new. The judge explained that there was a local charity, small but powerful, that offered scholarships to young people facing extreme hardship. It was created by someone who had grown up poor, just like Leo. Someone who understood what it meant to be hungry, to feel invisible, to be judged before ever being heard. The program was meant for kids like him, kids who had been overlooked, underestimated, or labeled too soon. Then the judge looked directly at Leo. You are not your worst mistake, he said. You're a brother, a son, a young man with a future. And today, I want to make sure that future isn't taken from you. Leo didn't move. He couldn't. His whole body was frozen. His breath caught in his throat. It felt like he was dreaming. Like any second now, he'd wake up in that tiny apartment again, wondering how to get through the next day. But this wasn't a dream. The judge granted him the scholarship. And just like that, the entire courtroom erupted into applause. It wasn't the kind of slow, polite clapping people do when they feel obligated. It was real, honest, full of feeling. People stood to their feet. Even the court staff clapped, some with tears in their eyes. The air in the room had changed completely. This wasn't about pity. It wasn't about charity. It was about respect. Leo's mother, sitting just behind him, finally broke. Her hands flew to her face, and her shoulders shook with sobs she could no longer hold back. For weeks, no months, she had carried guilt like a boulder on her back. The shame of not being able to provide, the fear of losing her son, the pain of watching everything slip through her fingers. And now that weight began to lift. Tears streamed down her face as she cried, not from sadness, but from relief, from love, from pride. Leo turned and saw her, and in that moment something inside him cracked open. His jaw trembled, his eyes filled, but he didn't cry, not yet. He was still trying to process what had just happened. All his life, he had been talked over, brushed aside, blamed, ignored. His world had always felt like a storm, loud, violent, and unforgiving. But now, for the first time, the storm had passed, and what he saw in the silence that followed was something he hadn't felt in a long, long time: hope. He wasn't just some poor kid who'd made a mistake. He wasn't just a case or a number in the system. He was seen for who he really was, and not just seen, but believed in. That moment felt like a miracle, because it was. It's easy to think of justice as cold, hard rules written on paper, but that day, in that courtroom, justice became something else entirely. It became human. It became understanding. It became compassion. And that made all the difference. All of it began with just one sentence. 14 quiet words. A simple truth that cut deeper than any accusation ever could. Leo hadn't spoken them to defend himself. He had spoken them because he couldn't carry the silence anymore. I only broke in because my sister hadn't eaten in 2 days. Those words didn't just silence the courtroom, they shifted it. They peeled back the layers of judgment and made people listen. Really listen. Behind every file folder, every police report, every courtroom bench, there's a story, a real one. And behind every story is a person, someone with pain, fear, love, and strength. Leo wasn't a troublemaker, he was a protector. A kid who saw his little sister going hungry and couldn't bear to watch her suffer another night. He didn't ask for help because he didn't think anyone would care, and maybe up until that moment no one had. But that changed, not because someone spoke for him, but because he finally spoke. The judge didn't see a rap sheet anymore. He saw a reflection of himself, a kid just trying to survive. We often judge people by the chapter we walk in on. We assume, we label, we look away. But if Leo's story teaches us anything, it's this: sometimes you have to stop and turn the page, because you might just find something worth reading. The sentence that froze the courtroom wasn't crafted by a lawyer. It wasn't clever or rehearsed. It was raw, honest, and it came from a place most people are too afraid to go: the truth. And that made all the difference. If this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up. Have you ever judged someone before knowing their full story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that touch the heart. And please share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that behind every face, there's a story worth hearing. Thank you for listening.